Hey everybody, it is Cinnamon Cooney, your Art Sherpa, and today we're going to paint some flowers overlooking the coast. So it's going to give you a chance to paint some distant water and some loose florals, which is great when you're trying to paint like more expressive flower paintings. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to show you the techniques, the color mixes, everything you need to know to create this for yourself at home. On the mic is my husband, John.
Hello.
He's going to help me show you how you can paint this step by step. He's going to make sure that if I'm demonstrating a technique, the camera is pointed at that technique. He's going to make sure that you can see everything that's being mixed on the palette. We have this broken down into steps. So if you check the description below, you will see that this video is time-stamped and chapter marked. Also, there is a matching step-by-step mini book that goes with this to really help you in your painting journey. So if there's new things or hard things in the concept of this, you can refer to that and use it to help you really increase your success. Now, maybe you came in because you thought, I really like purple flowers on the beach. I want to paint that. This is great. This painting does stand alone, but you might be interested to know that this is part of a 30 painting program to help people paint better landscape and water. That's a tongue twister.
Yeah, it is.
It is a tongue twister, but that's what it does is it teaches you to paint water landscapes. So you're going to learn to paint oceanscapes and seascapes and streams and lakes and all the things in transparent water. So definitely check out Acrylic April because that's amazing and it's totally free. Either way, get your paint, get your brushes, and I would like to show you how you can create this for yourself at home. Come on, let's start this. Today's materials are an 8x8 canvas. I have a wish or intention on here for you in your painting journey. This is based on one of my very favorite sayings, may you bloom where you were planted. I have loved this saying my entire life because I think it really speaks to how to thrive wherever you are. And in relationship to this art journey, how I'd like you to take it is that you enjoy where you're at in your art journey. The skills that you have, the process that you're in, let that be the flourish and not live in the past or the future of your art journey so much, but enjoy the now. I have the medium Cud Red Medium, Quinacridone Magenta, Dioxazine Purple, Phthalo Blue, Ultramarine Blue, Burnt Sienna, Phthalo Green, Cad Yellow Medium, Mars Black, and Titanium White. You like the bloom where you are planted statement? I heard you going,
I love it.
It's good, isn't it? To be present and be everything that you can be in the moment that you're in right now. I think that's a very powerful statement.
Yeah.
All right. There's nothing to do besides muse on that powerful statement and also go on to step one. In step one, if you have been doing all 30 days with me, you're kind of familiar with this, where this is going to go. But if you're brand new here, what we're going to do is set a horizon line. And I'm going to use a tool called a T-square. I'm going to make a line across my canvas in the upper third. I'll give you the exact measurement once I lay it down. I don't want too much sky going on because there's a lot of ocean and then these forward plants. So the sky is far, far away. That looks to be about 1.5, just a little bit past 1.5 inches at the top. Right here would be 1.5. So just under that. You just want a little strip of sky. And the nice thing about the T-square is it allows you to really create a straight line. I'm using a watercolor pencil because that will disappear into the paint. You could use chalk as well. That would be equally effective. I'm going to grab a number 8 cat's tongue. It doesn't need to be specifically this brush. This is an Art Sherpa cat's tongue. I'm just using it because it's a nice width. It's about 1/2 inch wide and it'll give me a good application of paint. I'm going to come here and load my brush with some blue and with some white because my distant sky today is going to be a little bit far away and kind of neutralized out. We're going to come across here. I want to keep my horizon line as level as I can. And the reason for that is so that it will look like water. If I tip my horizon line, it will look like the water is pouring out. I'm going to just go back and forth in this far off kind of sky space. Just back and forth. You can see the color is pretty light. Across here. Now, cool thing that I'm going to do is once this is pretty even and smoothly covered, I'm going
It's a very uniform blue, isn't it?
It is. I'm going to take a little bit of my ultramarine and a little of my phthalo mixed together and make a darker color and come across the top and just imply a slightly darker value of the sky up top.
Now, this is a bit of wet into wet.
Wet into wet. So the paint that I'm painting over is still wet. It has not dried. And then I'm blending down into this area the color that I'm adding in. And it's just a little bit of these little atmospheric things can make a difference for us because skies just tend to be multitonal. They're very rarely just one color.
Mm-hmm.
Even when they're just one color. It's an interesting thing when you see it. And just a little white across, just keeping that blend so it's a bit of a horizon, bit of a deal. Now on here, I'm going to go ahead and use a wet brush to sort of pre-erase this here, and I am going to take a number 26 bright. I'm going to get it damp and get a mix of the ultramarine and phthalo blue 1-to-1 together and sort of paint everything a thin coat of this down. This is the first sort of layer of this.
Base coat.
Now, it can be kind of streaky. I just want to get some on there. As you do. 1-to-1 mixture on this. I'm not that worried about it. I'm not that concerned. I'm just brushing back and forth. It's going to be fine. Up here at the horizon line, I may switch back to my cat's tongue just to give me a nice edge. Because my brush, as you can see, is a little bit floofed out today.
Mm-hmm.
I need to reshape it. But I got to do that in the cleaning process. So it'll have to be later. You would just take whatever brush would give you a nice sharp edge so that you could create a horizon line that was level. Step 1 today is a very easy step. Paint everything blue. There we go. Now, the directionality and all that, I do try to keep it somewhat horizontal, but I'm going to be painting over all of this. This is just my starting point. So when I put all my blues into it, they'll have some depth to them and look interesting. Let's dry the canvas, and then we'll come back for the next step. I'm going to use my T-square again and a tool. This is a chalk pencil. I'm using a chalk pencil because it's going to allow me to sketch on the canvas, but it's not going to interfere with the paint when I layer it on. You could use a watercolor pencil, chalkboard chalk, a chalk pencil, a piece of pastel. You wouldn't want to use anything that was grease or oil based. That would be what you would want to avoid. And just below about the halfway point, I think I'm going to put in a fence post. And I'm going to use my T-square ruler to do that because even though it's a round little fence post, straight lines are going to help me a bit. And that will let me know where things are. And I can kind of sketch in some major items. Like, so if I have a bit of a rock peninsula coming out, and this is going to help me explain why some of the water is churning around a few places. Mm-hmm. That, and then I know I've got plants coming down at an angle like this. This just gives me some information about what is happening in my ocean, right? And then there's going to be spikes. I don't need to put too much detail into that, but it will help me explain some of the water. You want to get some of the churning kind of foamy water. That's a good thing. Now that I have that sketched in, I will take a number 6 hog round. This is a hog bristle brush that's round. It's very stiff and scruffy, and it's going to help me do a very nice little cloud. I'm going to take a little of my titanium white with a smidge of my ultramarine. It's not going to be pure white. It's going to be pretty white, though. And I'm going to go ahead and just, here in the distant horizon, kind of imply far away little cloud puffs. It's just, these are little implications, and they should blend fairly much into the lower banding of the sky that we have.
And it's important to get this, to have the previous layer dry in order for this to work.
Well, for sure the sketching.
Well, I mean, like the sky part where you were
Yeah.
working wet into wet earlier.
You could still probably pull it off, but you do get a stronger, more stark effect if the layer underneath is dry. I could still do it wet into wet. It wouldn't completely throw me. But, we're just trying to imply little bits of distant cloudness. All right. So I'm going to kind of make these lines a little stronger. Maybe sketch out their stoniness a bit, because stone is, especially volcanic stone that has been eroded by the ocean, has a lot of interesting angles. Now, I don't need to worry about it too much here, and we know where the pole is for the wood. I'm going to take this while I'm here and grab a little bit of my burnt sienna and my Mars black together and kind of paint this in now. Just to know where it is. I'll turn my surface to the left here just slightly. Doesn't have to be perfect. I don't really know why I'm being so precious about it right there because it just needs to be a dark strip. So get here and actually, you know what I can do to help the picture?
What's that?
I will take my black and brown paint and kind of sketch in with my black and brown paint for the step-by-step of it. See what I'm doing?
Yeah.
I'll make a nicer photograph. Because that's just going to help me anyways in a minute. I'm going to be putting this all down in that color anyways in a minute. I think I'll give myself maybe another little stone. We'll see if I like it later, but I think it'd be nice. Because generally these shorelines have bits of stuff going on. Telling myself where stuff will go. Okay. Now we know where some stuff goes, don't we?
Blocking it in.
Kind of blocking it in. Loosely roughing it in so you know where the stuff goes. When we come back, we'll start to put some more resolution on this landscape. Dried my surface, and I'm going to do an extra little step here. I'm going to add some tape. This is artist tape to my horizon line, so I can paint a very crisp, distant horizon line that's super level. So I'm going to take this tape and put it down along my edge here, making sure that I have a very level line. I'm also going to burnish this line with my finger, just rubbing that down. Now, when I come down and paint everything below this, hopefully what will happen is I'll create a nice seal, it will dry, and I will get a very crisp, distant horizon line. Let's take our ultramarine and phthalo blue again together. Number 6 hog bristle brush, and we're going to brush back and forth along the tape, which hopefully I burnished very well. Kind of around the edges to create that distant, darker ocean effect. Coming down about an inch or so from the horizon line, brushing back and forth. Now I can get a little of the aqua color going by adding a little of the green into my blue mix over here. And it can be fun to kind of get little spots that maybe look greener in the distant water versus the blue. Mm-hmm. These kind of values really kind of speak to kelp and lighting and all kinds of different things. And water, even when it's pretty strongly blue, is rarely just one blue. I'm going to grab and get another very light mix going here. I'll bring some of that up. I'm still going across. Far away, we don't have that much chop. We'll have a little bit of chop that we can paint, but there's not that much chop that we can paint. And come around my rocks. Get some depth at first. These things are about the layers.
Mm-hmm.
Grab some of my greener color. Now, a few places out here in the distance, I'm going to put some little chop bits. These are little areas where maybe some wind has hit some wave or part, something has disrupted the surface. Maybe there's a little bit of a rock underneath there. It's interesting, all the different things that could be causing your chop.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really have a corridor of light in this painting. Mostly we have the impact of ambient light and wind. So those are the things that we're going to be painting. I'm just making little dashes with my brush coming across, just telling the story of a little bit. Now, around this coastline, it gets really cool. We're going to take a little of our green over to our phthalo blue. I might even tip a little of my cad yellow into it and quite a lot of white. And all around here, I'm going to start to speak to some of this interesting water. The water starts to move and become colorful and not smooth, in motion. And that's really about the coastline. So we're just starting to put in some lines to speak to that. This is just the beginning. We'll come forward adding a little bit of the ultramarine blue and white mix to here. I also want to come through here, kind of wiggling this back and forth because, again, this water will be in deep motion. I can grab ultramarine and blend it in while everything is still wet, just to capture some of that chop. This is the beginning of stuff that's happening. It's not the end all be all what's happening, it's just the beginning.
Yeah.
Maybe let's put a little more dark color here. We're just getting some thoughts about the water going on, and I'm going to take my burnt sienna and my Mars black make some rough strokes to talk about stone. Just pulling that in. This is again that underpainting.
Now, are you using the paint pretty much just straight out of the tube there?
There's a little mix of brown and black on it. The value is pretty deep, though.
And how much water are you using in there?
Not very much water. There is water kind of in the brush, but that is because hog bristle brushes carry an extra bit of water. So I've made a point of not adding a lot of water because the brush tends to get a little soaked as it is. Let's rinse that out and dry that brush off. And let's call this a step. We'll dry our canvas and we'll come back and add another layer. So So I made sure that my hog bristle brush is fairly wipe free of water. And we're going to do two different kind of browns here. We're going to pull the wood out from the stone by making a weathered wood kind of effect, which I'm going to take my ultramarine blue and my burnt sienna to create. They do that fairly well together. I'm going to come along here and dry brush or roughly brush along this wood. And grayed out browns and blues, like really weathered. If I want to make the wood a little darker on the bottom, that is a good idea. I'm going to be using short strokes. I'm trying to create a rough wood texture. I'm not going to take my detail too much to the right. And the reason for that is that we've got a lot of plants that are going to be in front of it. So we won't be served by leaning into that. I'll keep wiping my brush off on a towel, paper towel, just to keep this rough. See here, I'm just kind of creating a little wood texture. Come on the top. Kind of create a highlight there. Isn't that nice?
That's really nice.
Looks good. And just enough so that if something is peeking out, that looks really, really good. I'm going to rinse out and again, really dry off this brush. Really, really, really dry off this brush. I'm going to apply some rough rocks back here in the background. And to kind of get to there, I'm going to take a little of my yellow and red and burnt sienna to create some different kind of ochres and siennas that are brighter.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to highlight some rocks. And we're going to go like a little more brown. Definitely we want to leave a good amount of the dark value underneath because ocean rocks, especially the volcanic ones, do tend to have deep shadows. So you wouldn't want to remove those.
And when the sun is shining bright, it creates deep shadows for our eyes.
It really does. Just keeping this kind of rough. Again, we know we're going to have a lot of plants in front of here, so too much detail on this is just not advised. On this back end where we know we're going to have stalks and stalks of plants.
So you might feel bad painting it over a little later.
Yeah. So from really here back, you want it enough so if a leaf doesn't cover everything, it looks cohesive and whole, but not so much where you're like, no, what did I do? Add a little more yellow and brown. Again, creating some rock forms. Highlights here and there.
I love them.
It's fun stuff to do. Rinse out. Back into the black. And exaggerate the shadows between the rocks and along the water's edge. And more than enough back there for the rocks. Hopefully it's sort of surprising in your mind, like how well that goes.
It really is.
I'm going to take a little bit of this bright color and kind of get it into my gray. And I don't want my brush that wet. That was too wet. So I'm going to come back again, as you do. Just a little bit of that little sunlight on there. Okay. That is a step. We get to peel the tape, and hopefully that went well. Yay.
Yeah.
Sort of a little boo-boo right there around the side, which I can easily kind of clean up. So it's an around the side boo-boo, not one we have to be super concerned about. All right, when we come back, more water drama. I'm going to add some more detail into the water, maybe define this rock a little more. I'm going to use my number 4 round. I'm not using the hog here because I want a crisper, cleaner line, a little more control over the colors that I'm getting and the effects that I have. I'm going to add a little white to my blue-green color, which is the phthalo blue and the phthalo green and titanium white. I might even get a little of my cad yellow into some of it, so I can really get those aquatic values going.
Yeah.
I like it in my sea greens. And come around places, and I'm going to be wiggling my brush. I'm turning my canvas to the side because that's a convenient angle for me to work. But if we'll look at the kind of wiggle, the values of the waves that I'm painting in, about the way that they kind of are a zigzag horizontal is what I would call it. So if you see what I mean, like they're kind of horizontal and they come around, but they're also a very wiggly line.
Mm.
And I can come in and get, a darker color going. Grab some phthalo blue. And then you can even get ultramarine blue into it. It's really fun to play all the sea colors against each other. And we haven't even gotten into the aqua that is ultramarine blue and phthalo green. They have their own aqua that's very specific and deep in teal that I like to play with. Add a little white here and there against the dark colors. Now, again, over here, I need to paint it in, but I don't want to put every bit of ounce of detail into that specific one. The reason being is I'm going to have a lot of plants right there. So if I put everything into that, I'm going to have a really hard time painting over it. Add some little sea foaming. Sea foam does sea foam things.
Yeah.
Sea foam does sea foam things. It turns around. You got to have that kind of lacing. And at this point, we've done some sea foam, so we understand how it is. Come through here and really.
I just watching how this comes together around that rocks. I'm just sort of quietly here, really focused on the cameras.
Enjoying it?
Yeah. So that's why I'm probably a little quieter than.
And it's just fun to watch, right? You can always pull a little, like if you're like, no, I want a little more blue to come into here. You can always bring a color back in, see? I'm just brushing back and forth. And even that brushing back and forth with the white and blue on my brush, look at the ocean elements that it just creates. It can't even help itself. It just wants to. Mm. It's like it just wants to be water. And I think in some way it does just want to be water. I'm going to add a lot more white to this, and then I might come along here and splash up a little water on the rock. Right? It does its little water thing. So now it's splashed up on the rock. That really helps it a lot feel like water too, if you look at that. So the ripples are coming around the rock. We're seeing the shoreline from their impact. I do think I want another rock here. I'm going to take my brown and black just real quick. And this will be kind of one of those rocks that's maybe a little hidden. In that it's worn down, and then we'll add some highlights and things and put some water around it. Mm-hmm. Because that's a constant thing going on. Even in under the water, you'll see like dark areas that could be rocks. I've just added a little blue to that brown mix, and you can see that gives me like a little dark area I can talk about. These little shadows will give us an excuse to move water in unexpected ways. And again, remember that we've got quite a lot of plants. So I've got to be careful that I don't put all my work in an area where I'm going to be like, oh no, why did I do it? Still paint, so it'll be okay. Get a little more water on there. I'm going to turn this just a bit so I have some control over how I'm lacing out the sea foam.
I love the sea foam.
Sea foaming is foaming.
A little laciness is so nice.
You get FOMO of your sea foam.
It's interesting because you have to sort of trust that the layers are going to develop it.
Yeah, you really do.
And, because as you're working through there, it doesn't necessarily look like what you think it should until you look back, and then it is.
And then it is. And here's what. If you're really new to painting, you're not going to trust your layers. You're not going to trust stuff as you go. Because you just don't have the experience to know it's going to be okay in the end. You get some of that teal. That was the ultramarine and phthalo green from earlier. Let's wander this through. This is a very wandering, zigzagging little motion. And again, I know I'm going to put plants over this, but I'll take my number 6 just real fast just to make sure that there is kind of a seamless. I've got a bunch of dark green I've got to put there. I really don't want to put too much time and effort into it. Mm-hmm. Just enough to acknowledge. Because there's quite a lot here.
Yeah, there is.
So, just got to be careful. I don't get so lost in the sea foam.
You just keep sea foaming?
Yeah. Now, let's let this dry. We'll come back and add some highlights and wet marks to the rock and some highlights to the sea foam.
Okay.
Let's put in some of the highlighting zhuzh. Now, at the beginning of this, I am going to get a little of my burnt sienna and some of my rock color from earlier. And I just want to make sure that not not bright highlights, but that I put just a few little kind of moments on top of this rock. It's really going to be defined by wet marks around it, but it's nice to have a little bit of that there. I'm going to get some of my white onto my brush here, and we're going to paint this rough sea chop in the white here. And that's really going to make this ocean happen. I am going to, I was just shaking at the hidden water drop. We always talk about there's a hidden water drop that can get into our brush.
Mm-hmm.
Just these little white marks just talk about the ocean. You know, we talk about the motion of the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
But it does. It has it breathes.
Oh, yeah, it does. In so many ways.
In so many ways. We breathe because of it. It breathes as it, you know, goes through, and all these wonderful little currents happen. And I want to make sure that we've got nice sea foam coming in all around. These little bits of rock. Just fun stuff. Fun ocean day. Too much water on my brush there.
Oh.
Just wipe off.
That would make that a little softer?
Yeah. It's okay. And just bring it through. You can splash water up the rock, as we do. Okay. The water splashes up the rock. Little rough sea foams. Now coming around here, around this rock, we have a lot going on. And there's just some water reflection on it. Because that's what would happen. All right. Now we have that distant background landscape going on so that our foreground flowers are framed in their environment. When we come back, we're going to paint some flowers. So there is this overall shape to a plant that we're working on, and there's individual elements of the plant. And the best thing to do, I'm going to take a number 8 cat's tongue, and I'm going to get my brush wet, and we're going to begin by talking about this overall shape. So I'm going to grab my burnt sienna and my phthalo green and make a very deep color, because deep in the plant would definitely give us a deep color. And I'm going to paint in kind of overall plant shape with this big brush, just covering lots of area and space.
Mm-hmm.
I need to leave room to put in individual focal leaves from the overall plant mass, but there's no point in not painting in what's, you know, we know is going to be solidly represented.
Right.
In a very solid way. Right? It needs to have some depth here. It just isn't going to work unless it has some deep green. And we can always come back and put in some detailed green, but, you know, it's just nice to get that going. While this is having a think, I'm going to grab my number 4 round. And I'm going to piece in some of these little spiky leaf shapes. These will be the ones in shadow on the edge here. So the edge of this plant doesn't feel like just a bunch of mishmash brushstrokes that we just put in.
Right.
Even though it is just a bunch of mishmash brushstrokes on some basic level that we just put in.
But they give the illusion of something more.
Everything in art is illusion.
And there's a lot of shadow here.
Well, there would be deep in the plant. It's a pretty solid plant, and so there's just going to be a lot in shadow.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the shadow and highlights of this that are going to pull it all together. And you can see right away what I meant about don't put all your work where you're going to be painting it out.
Right.
Because that will just be super upsetting to you. The other thing that I can do at this stage is I'm going to get my green and brown. And we'll go ahead and put some of the spikes up for the distance. Maybe even take this a little bit up higher. It's interesting to figure out where you want to grab these stems. And even as you fill that in, you'll see things that you're like, oh, I got to really bring some of these strange little leaves out that are at the base of these stems. It is going to look like a hot mess until it doesn't. And there's really nothing I can tell you outside of that, except that it looks like a hot mess until it doesn't look like a hot mess anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm going to grab a little of my yellow and I'm going to put it into my green and brown that I have over here. Maybe even get some white into that. And we're going to put in just a bit of a highlight in these distant stems. And it is true that our far off flowers are much more in the dark.
Mm-hmm.
But taking the moment to add a few little highlights, even back here going on, make a big difference later. In this particular series of plant structures, feeling full and cohesively thought out. These plants have like these little spike down blades. A little more green, a little more yellow. Just make sure that this is still pretty dark because we've got to put lots of little details in, but we're just creating a depth. You know, the things that you see in the deep leaves, like I can go more green. It's very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
The kind of texture and structure of all of it. It will be hard to trust yourself in this stage. But take a deep breath and realize that as the layers build up and as the structure comes in, more and more is going to be apparent to you. Now
Gotcha.
I'm going to dry this because I really want to be able to paint layers up and build up layers. And we have these purple spikes to do. So go ahead and give this a dry with a hairdryer. So I've got my number 6 hog back, and I'm going to be putting in some of these spike flowers. Spike flowers are interesting creatures. I'm going to use maybe a little of my cad red, a lot of my magenta, and some of my dots purple to work these in because they're really a flower that's made up of many flowers. So I'm going to build the spikes up.
It's an army of flower.
It's an army of, well, it really is an army of flowers. And they're quite substantial. And you have to build up the little different spikes of them and their little structures. They have lighting too, so they're so cylindrical. That's another thing to think of is that they're so cylindrical that they'll have like a clear, defined lighting that makes them round. And they layer in on each other pretty specifically. So I'm doing the furthest back ones and then I'll come forward. And then we only have to shade what we can see. There's also an interesting version of them that'll be mixed in that are green and red of those that have not yet bloomed.
Oh, yeah.
And it may be hard to kind of see some of these in here because they're going to be so initially dark against the green background. And in how we show some of these and the greens in here, man, it is going to be really cool. You definitely want to have some exiting off the canvas. You don't want to be able to see them all clearly.
It's really interesting how all of these different shadow layers really bring out the final painting, the final flower.
And you need them, in my opinion. I mean, this is my opinion. You need them. Again, some coming off the canvas is always a good idea. It implies that there's a world beyond what we see, and we need that world. And I think what will make this work is the blooming spikes and the soon to be blooming spikes, plus the pops of green between all of it, I think will make a huge, big difference. You can see why I was like, don't put your heart and soul in here. Sometimes you just got to know where not to put all of your love and attention in life and in your painting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing like working hard on something in life and realizing that was not where you should have put your time. We can't always know things ahead of time. So no work has ever gone wasted.
Try to learn from everything.
Yeah. Everything has a purpose. Even when you paint over something that you didn't need to, it still had a purpose. I'll rinse out a little bit. And I'm going to get a bunch more of my magenta and purple and some white. I do want to make sure that my brush is quite dry. Coming here and just kind of finding the shape of the flowers. It's nice because it's still wet, so it's sort of blending wet into wet here as I go down. Make sure that, again, my brush isn't soaking up too much of the water.
Mm-hmm.
We just got to go over the ones that we all put in with just a few highlights. And that kind of really helps them take form, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You can really see them and understand that they're in there. And there's some fun, cool greens we're going to get to pop in here and some really cool kind of my favorite color, tomato roses. So don't feel like, oh, and if you lose any shadow, you can always come back with purple, see? So even if you're like, oh, no, it would be more in shadow, you're not stuck.
I like the purple appearing here in the shadow. This is a very nice little hill you found.
Well, this is a very special plant. To be this close to the ocean, it has to be able to take a lot of salt.
Mm-hmm.
And survive extreme weather conditions, drought and rain. Like it has to be able to go from extreme to extreme.
Flowers like, don't worry if you're salty. I still love you.
Generally, it has to be hardy against predation. So, like, you wouldn't want a lot of animals. So because there would be so little life here on this cliffside, in some ways, the plants that have to be here have to be like, do not eat me. I do not accept your eating of me. I'm using brush strokes to help imply these little flowers. And I'm glad we have a couple flower-centric landscapes with water
Mm-hmm.
this year because I think it's important. There's a lot of flowers and landscapes and water. They are related to each other, certainly. Okay, let's call that a step. Rinse out, really dry out our brush. Come back for the next layer.
All right.
So while these are purple flowers, they're very colorful purple flowers, and there's lots of ways that we can get to that. I'm going to take a little of my dot ox purple and some of my cad red together
Mm-hmm.
and kind of get some neutralized cad red there. I'm going to come here and add a little of that a couple of places in the flower just because it's going to be dramatic. Not too much. It's a kissing. I think everyone's going to be super surprised at how colorful these end up being. Just a touch. See how we're just kind of kissing it around? Maybe I'm going to get some orange in here in a minute. It's just, got to get all the burgundies through. So many colors in these flowers I want to speak to. This will also help tie in the spikes that are green and red. Again, a little bit at a time. I'll rinse out thoroughly because I haven't even got my highest highlight on there. Let's get quite a light color going, and let's add a little cad red to that. So that's the Dox purple, quinacridone magenta, and cad red with quite a lot of white. Isn't that fun? And you can always play through these little micro mixes of the magenta.
I love how the colors play together.
And be like, oh no, I have a little highlight here.
This has been such a soft, like quiet little painting on the hill.
It is. It's a quiet little painting on the hill. The thing to avoid to feel satisfied with your flowers is that you will want to try to capture the shape of them and the value of them, and you won't want to make highlights and shadows too uniform. You need to have a distinct point of view. Right? Like even if you're like, oh, I'm going to add a little cad red there. Look, see how I did?
Mm-hmm.
A distinct point of view. And that will be something to keep track of as you're going. If I come more over into the white, I can add a little of that extra pink. And it is still pink. But I'll never be so far along I can't come back with purple or dark purple. And that's what's good to like know how to do these little mixes so that when you're coming through, you're like, oh, I can get to all the colors that I need. Keeping the shapes of that going. Right? Sometimes more magenta. You need to, giving those flowers value. Take some time, play with them. Don't get frustrated at your flower. Tempting to do. Tempting to get frustrated at your flower.
Oh, flowers can like they shouldn't frustrate.
But they do. They're confounding little beasts.
Confounding, maybe.
They're confounding little beasts. They frustrate artists world over and excite them. They want to be painted. They're exciting to paint, but we definitely have an experience with them. Now, drying out very much. Take a little of my Quin Magenta and Cad Red and also some Cad Yellow. Back into the magenta. And get a little bit of this orange here. The edges. Maybe a little bit right there. Just not going crazy with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they're on fire. So exciting. Look at those just light up.
They really do just catch the light. Like little sky lanterns on the ground. They catch the skylight. But they're on the ground.
There they go. I would say that is quite delightful. Let's call that a step and come back and add a little more color and personality to these wonderful flowers along the shore. So we're going to add some more of the just budding spikes. I'm going to take my red over to my cad yellow and make some oranges. Variety little oranges. And we're going to start building these spikes on my number 6 round with these oranges. If the number 6 round will do it, we'll keep it. If it won't do it, we will let it go. These are little ones that are thinking of becoming a big grown-up purple spike flower. And I'm starting them in this color, and then we're going to blend them into some interesting greens. It's kind of fun.
Mm-hmm.
When we have that there, I'm going to go ahead and get more yellow into it and then some green. And I may need to dry them. We'll see. It's at the base, and yeah, it looks like it's going kind of well.
I like that.
So we're just talking about how
We start dancing around on all of them.
just going to be flowers, but are not yet flowers. All right. I'll rinse that out. And I'm going to switch back into my number 4 round. I'm going to get some of my yellow over to my green. Make some bright greens, and we might, a few places even in the purple, kiss some green. Perhaps is, to the center, because these plants have quite a lot of green in them. Little bits. Just kiss it around. Let's just try not to make patterns and make sure that it looks like it's deep in the plant, as it would be. And I'm going to begin to put little spike leaves that we kind of see through this landscape. A little bit of the green and yellow. Just kind of picking that up. The leaves on all of this are quite pointed. If I look down and I'm like, that flower is too dark, I can take this moment to correct that.
Oh, yeah. Do you want to make it pop out a little bit more?
Okay. We don't have to leave it in the dark. And a little white to our green yellow. Little bits of sunlight do catch even deep in the can even talk about the little spikes going down. Get a little yellow in there. Just a couple places. Put a little yellow on the flowers. Oh no. Further up high. Not a lot of it. And the other thing that I can do, I can take a little bit of my black and blue and make sure that I show some shadows on the fence.
You're on the fence about your shadows.
If you're on the fence about your shadows, you can definitely put some shadows on the fence. You can also come back, if you feel like you painted out your deep values, you can come back and put deep values back in. So you can play until you're sure you're happy with where you are. Those just look really nice.
Yeah.
Going back and forth, having a little flower break.
I like the flower part.
That's your favorite part?
Actually, the highlights on the flowers are my favorite part.
This is when you're like, oh, there's highlights in the flowers.
It's like the highlights on the waves.
It just pulls it all together.
And it adds motion. The shadows give it depth, but the highlights really give it the motion and the sparkle.
That's good. I like just playing with it until it feels like if you grow these, I'd love, if you recognize these and grow them, you can totally make a comment and tell us about them. It's always a good thing to do. Sometimes I like to add get in there and just because again, you've got to shade them.
Little flower here and there.
Well, they have shading, so what you see me doing is just playing with their shape, but also the value, so that we can see them.
Can see them even.
I'm pretty happy with that.
Yeah.
We painted some flowers on the coast.
I liked them.
Now I got to find a place to sign it, which is going to be
in the flowers.
Yeah, and challenging, I think, overall. I think I'll grab some of my yellow. Green yellow. You little tiny brush. Come here and try to find a little spot. Hide my signature in the leaves. Like you do.
Yeah.
This was fun. I'm so glad we got a chance to do this. Do more of these. I enjoy this. I think flowers at the coast maybe is a subject this summer. So now we painted some distant ocean with some focal up front flowers. We're going to keep exploring the coastline ideas. So if you want to do more of this, go check out all of Acrylic April. It's 30 paintings that go together in building blocks to teach you about water and landscape. If you're here for Acrylic April, thank you so much for your time and your patience and your perseverance. It is a big deal, and it will pay off in dividends in your art results. Be good to yourselves. Be good to each other. And I want to see you at an easel really soon. Bye-bye.